All right. Well, why don't we get started? Good evening, everybody, and welcome to another Harmony Plus Saturday webinar. My name is William, and I do a lot of different roles in Harmony Plus. I'm a class coordinator. I manage a few programs. I do interview training, which will also be the focus of tonight's presentation. And I'm really happy that you made the time. I see a few familiar names on the attendees. And so for those of you who are repeat attendees, it really means a lot to everybody here at Harmony Plus that you would come and see us again. We really appreciate it. And we hope that you have as high expectations for the new year as we do. So here on this Saturday evening, we will be talking about, as I said before, how to ace college interviews, right? Interview season is right around the corner, regardless of when you applied. And so it's as good a time as any to brush up on some of the things that will make a successful interview. And so Calla and I will be talking a little bit about that tonight. So once again, thank you all for coming in. And let's get going. So I'll do a little brief interview for those of you who aren't as aware of Harmony Plus and what we do. So we are an official partner of some of the leading universities and institutions in the US. We've worked with UC Berkeley. We founded a program with them called B-Bay that was quite successful. We also do SRI International, which is a research institute founded by trustees of Stanford in the midst of the 20th century. We also work quite extensively with San Jose State University, and we have always been committed to providing top-notch programming to some outstanding local and international students. And so this idea of hybrid learning obviously became very popular in 2020 for obvious reasons, but it's something that Harmony Plus has been taking advantage of and utilizing well before that. And so when we say hybrid education, we're talking about a few things, right? We offer education services such as classes, programs in the AP variety, and also some of our California School Board accredited programming, as well as services such as future planning, some of our consulting services. And then we also do both online and offline programs. And of course, in this past year, it's been a much heavier emphasis on the online, like many programs. We do synchronous and asynchronous, and then we also have theory and practice. We do programs where you can receive guidance from top faculties. Actually, that's another area that Calla and I work together on pretty extensively. And we have endorsement from many leading universities, including some of the ones that I've just named, such as UC Berkeley. And we help students build competitive advantages regardless of what their background, what their interests, their fields might be. And then that's one of our goals, is always continuous improvement. We have this motto of upgrading education, which more than ever in 2020 we've strived for, and hopefully we'll continue to have going into this new year. And so some of our academic programs, we do a reading and writing series that has a very clear, very obvious, and very beneficial to students flow that starts from 4th grade and can go all the way up to high school. And so at that 4th grade level, you've got students looking at nonfiction writing, creative writing, and by the high school level, they're into analytical writing. We also do the standard AP tutoring with AP chemistry, AP English, Lit, and composition. We also do SAT and ACT prep, writing prep. We do soft skill enhancement, including our very successful Future Entrepreneur Challenge program. We also offer some public speaking courses. And then among our our professor research programs are some data strategy. We train people to compete in Kaggle, which is another data science competition, Future CEO. We've also done some environmental engineering and sustainable design programs with Stanford PhD, which was very exciting. And we also have done programs with global and national public policies and strategy. And so another thing we'll do, which I'll brush on briefly here, but Calla will talk about more at the end of tonight, is our future planning, which does a lot of college consulting, high school applications, 4-year planning. We work with summer programs, test preps, internship, transfer essay, and then the thing that we'll be focusing on a lot tonight, interview prep. So all of these things, the idea with all of these things is that they'll come together, right? Research programs or academic programs or soft skill enhancements are kind of like the rockets of a spaceship, as you see here, connecting together, with future planning sort of being the helm, the thing that brings us to what we call the moonshot, right? Your target, the area, the school that you can try your best to get into and hopefully get into with the proper resources and proper effort, right? We very much believe in this idea, shoot for the moon. Even if you miss, you'll land among the stars. And that fuels a lot of our services and planning here at Harmony Plus. But I think that's enough exposition. I do want to get into tonight's topic, how to ace college interviews. And so in order to do that, I will introduce my co-host, who is Miss Calla B, who has done a lot in our consulting services. She is a senior education consultant, and she's helped hundreds of students gain admission to their dream universities. She does hold a Master of the Arts in East Asian Studies from Stanford, and she was a full scholarship recipient for that. And she's a Bachelor of Arts as well in German, Chinese, and East Asian Studies from UW-Madison. She's worked at a lot of amazing companies that do this kind of work. She has lived, taught, and worked in China as well. And we're very lucky to have her tonight. So thanks for joining me tonight, Calla.
Well, thanks for that very flattering introduction, William. Now I guess I better introduce you. Okay, so here is Mr. William D. And we are co-speakers tonight. We aren't really doing the standard speaker and host thing. I guess, one of his official roles here at Harmony Plus is the FLA program manager. However, as you guys know, he wears many different hats here. He worked as a program manager for another Chinese education firm, these programs in Silicon Valley, took students to the Kennedy Space Center, and did tons of things with that. So he's very experienced in education. He was also a Fulbright Hays Scholar. That was in China, right? In Xi'an?
Yes.
Very, very impressive. And then before that, he got his Bachelor of Arts in Linguistics from UMass Amherst. Okay, so now to our feature presentation. Here is our agenda. So first of all, I'm going to talk about the purpose and importance of college interviews. It's kind of like a mystical thing, these interviews, because not all colleges have them. So let me enlighten you a little bit. After that, William will talk more about the different types of interviews. Then he'll talk about some strategies and discuss case studies. After that, I will talk about some virtual interview tips, because at this point with COVID, basically all interviews are virtual. Then after that, we will have a Q&A if you guys have any questions. Okay, so first of all, the purpose of college interviews. So what are they for? Well, most people assume that whoever is interviewing you, whether it's an alum or if it's an admissions officer, they're evaluating whether or not you'd be a good fit at that university and making sure that you're a good speaker, confident, have all of those credentials that they would want in a student. Okay, so that's certainly the big part of interviews for colleges. But, sometimes they just want to gather more information about you, about your personality, your goals, strengths, weaknesses, interests, and passions. Okay, this is just another way to show yourself. This is really a way to show that you're not just a number, like you're not just your GPA, not just your SAT score, right? Of course, you can write things in essays, but even the written word just isn't the same as seeing someone face to face, whether it's in person or virtual. So really seeing how you talk and present yourself can give the university a lot of information about you. And then there's also a benefit for students as well. You can also learn a lot more about that particular university. If you're talking with an alum, of course, you can get lots of firsthand knowledge and stories about that university. You can learn maybe about which classes are the hardest, which professors are awesome, things like that. So you can also really benefit from doing interviews. And actually, when I was gathering some information for this presentation, I was reading quite a few articles from admissions offices. And many college admissions offices actually said that the vast majority of the time, doing college interviews will benefit the applicant. So this isn't necessarily always a make or break thing. Of course, if you have a really bad interview, that's one thing. But normally, most of the time, this benefits students. So that's a bit about the purpose of college interviews, kind of threefold here. Okay, so the importance. Like I just said, normally it won't make or break. It normally won't make or break your application, but it definitely can give you a competitive edge over those other applicants. Okay, so let's say like you and another applicant have the same GPA, same SAT score. Maybe even your extracurriculars are relatively similar. Well, if you're very good at interviewing, you come across as very charismatic and caring and compassionate. All of those qualities that the universities want. Well, of course, that'll give you that competitive edge. And as we know, especially when you're applying to those top universities, every aspect counts. Okay? So it's definitely worth it to do those college interviews. Now, maybe you guys are wondering, how are college interviews working with COVID-19? Okay, well, as you guys can probably imagine, virtually all colleges that required or recommended interviews previously are now offering online interviews. It's simply not safe to have interviews in person these days. And actually, some universities are getting a little creative. So instead of scheduling online interviews with like all of the tens of thousands of applicants who apply, some of them are actually requesting that students submit a recorded video instead of having a live interview. So if you're wondering about that, here's an example, because that's actually what Brown has been doing. So this is text directly from Brown's website about this. Okay, so once students are able to go into that applicant portal, they can submit a 2-minute personal video portfolio. Well, what on earth does that mean? Okay, that sounds very broad. Well, it's really an opportunity to show Brown more about yourself in your own voice. Of course, you can somewhat get your voice in your essays when you're writing things down. But when you say it, it's on another level, has a totally different feel. Okay, and actually on this webpage, they had a whole list of things that you could discuss, but basically it's very open-ended. They really want to, first of all, know who you are, but then also see what's important to you. Okay, so whatever you think is the most important thing about yourself that you could share in 2 minutes to the college of your dreams, that's what they want to hear for this kind of thing. So at Harmony Plus, when we help students do these kinds of videos, that's definitely something that we can help students brainstorm, because it can be pretty overwhelming to think like, oh, what should I say in this 2-minute video? And actually recently, I was helping some students apply for graduate schools. And I would say those videos are even more common for graduate schools. So quite a few grad schools do that. And it's always a little challenging to figure out exactly what you're going to say about yourself in a minute or 90 seconds or 2 minutes. But we always come up with a good script. Okay, so another thing. Actually, a lot of interviews are optional. So a lot of students are like, well, if it's optional, do I really have to do it? I don't like doing interviews. I don't like talking to people online. Well, in college admissions, if something says it's recommended or optional, that means you should probably do it because it'll increase your chances. Okay, so that's why I have yes in capital letters there. Okay, so as I said before, this kind of thing will almost always help your candidacy. Whether your interview is like pretty good or really, really good, it's probably going to help you. Okay, 90% chance it's going to help you. Because it really just shows a more complete picture of you as a multi-dimensional person. Because when you do an interview, it's not just about your SAT score, GPA, all that stuff. It's about who you really are and how you carry yourself. Another thing is that when you take advantage of all of these optional opportunities, it demonstrates your interest in that particular university. Because you're probably applying to quite a few different schools. Well, if you're taking advantage of all these opportunities, it shows that you're willing to put even more time into trying to get into that school. So overall, say yes to optional. Okay, now I want to give you guys some notes for scheduling interviews. Okay, so actually for a lot of schools, you as a student will need to initiate the process. So some schools will email you and invite you to interview. Okay, but other schools will kind of want you to do that. So there are a few ways to do this. So for some schools, you need to request an interview a few weeks earlier than the application deadline. Okay, so generally speaking, I never encourage students to wait until the deadline to submit their applications, but this is one more reason to absolutely not do that, because otherwise you might miss an interview opportunity. So depending on which schools you want to apply to, it's good to always be checking their website and then seeing when that deadline might be to request an interview, if you have that option. Okay, then sometimes after you submit your application, schools will send an email to you and they'll invite you. So sometimes it'll be more like an invitation, like, oh, we really like your application, and we want to learn more about you, so let's schedule a time. Here's the alum who's going to interview you. Other times they'll email you and just say, oh, if you want, you can do this, sign up here. Okay, so either way, you really need to be paying attention to your email after you submit those applications. Okay, and then once in a while, there's even an option on the application to request an interview. Okay, so just keep your eyes peeled for all of that. Okay, now here are some specific interview policies for the Ivy League schools I have first, and then other highly selective schools. Because most of the schools that have interviews will be the private, highly selective schools. Even some of the top public schools, like UCLA, Michigan, University of Virginia, they just get so many applicants. Like, even though they're top schools, they just couldn't possibly interview everyone and give everyone that chance. So this is more for private, highly selective schools. And of course, all of the Ivy League schools offer interviews in some capacity. So as we can see, out of the Ivies, almost all of these are evaluative ones, okay? The only school that does not have an evaluative one is Cornell, which is a little more informational. So Cornell is bigger than the other Ivy League schools, so that's probably one of the reasons why they just make it an informational one. Okay, but they do have some requirements for certain majors here. Okay, so many times for like art and architecture and special professional majors like the School of Hotel Administration, they not only require interviews, but they also have other requirements like portfolios as well, for instance. So that kind of makes sense along that logic line. Okay, and then the other schools is just recommended. So if you're applying to those Ivies, definitely take advantage of this. Okay, then some other top schools that technically aren't a part of the Ivy League. I guess we can say Ivy Plus, right? Okay, so many of these have optional ones. We even have a required one here from Georgetown. Okay, so very few schools require interviews, but there are a few exceptions, as we can see. But overall it's good to do that for these highly selective schools. So if you're applying to any of these, definitely take advantage of the opportunity to interview. Okay, now let's talk about some different types of interviews. So I was just talking about evaluative versus informational. So essentially, here's the difference. Evaluative assesses your candidacy. Okay, so like, what's your background? Would you be a good fit for this school? And then informational is more to benefit the students. If you just want to like talk to an alum and learn more about the university. Okay, so that's the main difference. And then we have staff interviews and alumni interviews. So that's another type that we'll get into more in a little bit. Okay, so a school that has an evaluative interview is Stanford. And actually, the way that they word this here on their website, it's actually partially evaluative, partially informational. But I would say maybe it's more evaluative overall. Okay, so the reason I say it's kind of both is because of this that I highlighted in blue. This is a two-way exchange that allows you to learn more about Stanford and for the admission office to learn more about you. Okay, so both ways, but they're definitely taking notes and writing things down about you when you interview with them. Okay, and another thing to note that I highlighted here, okay, like if the high school is in your interview area, that's how you can get an interview. So in some places, they simply don't offer interviews, unfortunately. Even though they're virtual now, it is based on your geographic location. So, if you're not able to because of where you live, like if they just don't have interviewers in your country or in your area, no worries about that. It won't be at a disadvantage to you. Okay, and then we can go on to the next part. Okay, and then many people are wondering like how you can prepare for an interview with a top school like Stanford. Well, they really don't have a list of set questions that the interviewers are for sure going to ask. They just kind of go with the flow. Of course, they're going to ask the basics like, who are you? What do you want to study? Why do you want to go to Stanford? Like, always prepare for those. Okay, but the conversation will be unique overall, wherever it heads. So some of the things that students should prepare for like Stanford or basically any of these top schools, just make sure that you really can talk about your experiences and goals, because that's something they're really going to be looking for. That's what they want to know about you, of course. You should also prepare questions to ask your interviewer. Okay, so make sure that you know about Stanford or the other school you're applying to. Make sure you do some research. And then ask those questions that you can't easily find on the website. Or even maybe ask about their own personal experiences, because testimonials, you can't always find that. Okay, now we can take a look at an example of an informational interview. So Cornell is the Ivy League school that has informational interviews. Okay, so here, they just emphasize it is optional, it's pretty informal, can help the admission committee get to know you better, but they directly state its main purpose is to give you an opportunity to ask any questions you have about Cornell. Okay, so that's why this is informational. It's more for the student. So you better show up with some good questions and do some good research on Cornell first.
All right. So I will swoop in a little bit and take over this next part. I do want to point out that many of the pieces of advice that Calla has mentioned are par and stock and trade for what we do in our future planning services in our interview training. And that's something that we'll talk about a little bit more at the end. Earlier in the conversation, Calla alluded that there's two sort of main types of interviews, right? One with a staff member and also one for an alumni. And so I'm going to walk through a little bit about each one and also show you some of the advice that I typically give during my interview trainings. And so the fifth one is don't be nervous when you have that staff interview. You should always think of it as a casual conversation. They want to know more about you and see if you're a good fit for the school. Some of the other advice I give is to tell people to take notes during it. And that's both for your own reference later on and also to indicate to the staff member that you are paying attention and that you're invested in the things that they're saying. And the advice I give during Zoom interviews is to be a little bit obvious about this. Make sure that they can at least see your pen moving around on camera. That will give you a big leg up. And so if you know who it is in advance, which sometimes you don't, a lot of times with these interviews, it's a situation where they bring you into the admissions office and you get paired with whoever might be on duty for that time. For some of those bigger schools where they schedule in advance, you might know that person and be able to do some Googling online. And the other thing I want to mention is the thing I always want to tell people is to display intellectualism more than intelligence. And I always ask people when I'm doing this training, I always ask students if they understand what the difference between those two words is. But for you guys, I'll just give it away, which is intelligence just means that you're very smart, right? It means you can hold a lot of knowledge in your brain. You can walk into a test and get an A, but then maybe what you do after that is up to you, right? An intellectual person is somebody who does the good grades and studies hard and learns more in their fields because that's something that they genuinely care about and something that they're interested in. And some stereotypes with certain applicants might be that they're intelligent, but they're not intellectual. And so it's important that you break that and show that you are here because you do have a genuine passion for knowledge, right? It's something that left to your own devices you would do anyway. And so shortcoming questions, I do always tell people to be honest, but not self-deprecating, right? Meaning if they ask you what's something you could improve at, they are looking for a genuine answer. Remember that these are staff members who have read numerous essays and numerous applications from many applicants bolstering their own appeal or bolstering their own background and talking about what makes them strong applicants. And so if they ask you, where's an area you could improve at? The last thing that an applicant should do is give an answer like, oh, well, my big shortcoming is that I work too hard, right? I think even on the job market, people are told not to give answers like those. And what I usually say to applicants, especially for people who speak Mandarin Chinese, as I think most people here do, is it's kind of like saying like "tai hao le," right? When we use "tai" there, which means like too much of something, we're not using it in a negative way, right? And so it's the same logic for these, right? You want to give an answer that is genuine, but also show how you may have addressed this issue or plan to address it. And I will give a example of that later on. And then the other thing is most of the people here are looking because they are currently have high school students who are looking to go into colleges. But I do tell people looking for transfers, don't insult your current school too much, right? Because you don't want the school administrator to think, or the admissions officer to think, that once you get to their school, the first thing you're going to do is start complaining about all the things they do wrong as well, right? If you have to talk about something you don't like about your current school, make sure that it is a constructive thing, such as, I wish they had more opportunities in my field of study. I wish that the student body was a little more inclusive, things like that. So then when it comes to the alumni interview, Calla talked a little bit about it before, but I'll give you a little bit more on some of the differences with them. So as Calla mentioned, usually alumni interviews are utilized by the top tier schools, the Ivy Leagues, and sometimes those Ivy adjacent or Ivy Plus that you saw on the second slide. And the reason that they're able to utilize those is because these schools often have very large, very powerful alumni networks that are also very loyal to the school and are very proud of their affiliation to the school, and are therefore willing to continue to do some kind of generous volunteer work for the school by acting as admissions officers. Now, I do want to say that there is a big categoric difference between alumni interviews and staff interviews, which we just looked at, which is that the alumni interview, remember, they're not a formal admissions officer, and their decision or their recommendation, of course, can help, but it's not a make or break. It's even less of a make or break than, as Calla described, the interview process in general, right? Remember that for most of the alumni, what they'll do after the interview is write up a paragraph. Maybe they'll check some boxes, but usually have some kind of written section where they summarize how the interview went, how they felt about that student. And so it's almost, you could almost think of it as another essay section on your application, except it's an essay that's not written by you, right? It's an essay that's written by somebody else who now has acquainted you for a brief period of time, right? It's just basically adding another data point to your application. And so another thing to think about is that they likely have not seen your full application. Because of protection clauses, non-disclosures, and other rights to privacy, usually universities will not reveal the full application profile to an alumni interviewer. And so usually what they'll get is the person's name, where they live, their intended major, very small pieces of information. You will seldom see an alumni interviewer who has access to an essay or a full transcript. And so that's another thing to think about. That means that you will have more ground that you'll need to cover in terms of introducing yourself and showing off your profile when you are in the interview. And so the things that I always recommend with the alumni is that you do research on them. You will always have an opportunity to learn more about this person through Google. You will know their name in advance, and you can always try to incorporate their background into the questions. Right. And so another thing to remember is to provide background context for school developments since that person graduated. Right? Sometimes you'll have alumni members who have graduated from the school very recently. For example, one of our staff members, Shani, is a graduate of the University of Pennsylvania and still acts as an alumni interviewer for that school. However, she graduated in 2017. So she's fairly recent graduate of the school, and so doesn't need a whole lot of updating on what's going on since then. People who are interviewing with alumni members from older generations, like in the 90s or even the 2000s, those people who are participating in interview, those students, those high school students, will need to provide some background on changes the school has made, right? That will help the alumni member feel some nostalgia about this place where they matriculated, and it will also show that alumni member that the student has taken the time to really get to know the school and really invested time and effort into understanding the school. Remember that for these top tier schools like the Ivies, most school applicants for those are applying to schools like a double-digit number of schools, 10 plus, right? And so many interviewers deal with students who the school they're interviewing for is just another box they're checking off on their overall list, right? It's very important with the alumni to show that you really get that spirit and get what makes it special. And so going into concrete detail will help with that as well, right? Going into clear, specific details, referencing things on the campus, referencing accomplishments of the school. If these alumni are so proud of their school that they're still willing to volunteer their time to do it, then that means they really have a lot of pride and faith in the school. And so student applicants who demonstrate an understanding of that will receive a leg up. And so I do want to point out an alumni case study that we had very recently for a student who was applying to the University of Pennsylvania. And so this student, we're going to call David, but in the case studies I show off, I have changed the names of all the applicants to protect their privacy. And so he received a request to do an alumni interview from one of the alumni who had graduated in the year 1992. And David received this interview invitation quite late, actually. He received it about 24 hours before it was supposed to be conducted. This alumni interviewer had kind of neglected to send out it in an appropriate manner of time, and its due date for when he had to get it back to the UPenn admissions office was the following afternoon. And so our poor David had less than 24 hours to prepare for this interview. However, there is a silver lining to this, which is that going into the alumni interview, our dear alumnus is already apologetic to our David for giving him such a limited amount of time to prepare. And what's fortunate is that in the less than 24 hours that we had, there's a lot that we can do to prepare, right? We already know a lot about the alumni interview and how it works. And we were fortunate to have been given an alumni person who is very Googleable. This guy is a lawyer in the DC area who has quite an extensive record. And he also has from a military family, had done a lot of very notable things in his time, both in UPenn and outside. And so we're able to do some quick research on alumni and his relationship to Penn and ask questions based on his specific experience. Now, David is interested in finance as well as in coding and computer technology. And so for an alumni member who graduated in the 90s, this is definitely an area where we're going to need to update a little bit on what has UPenn done in these fields, because computer programming obviously has made huge leaps and strides since 1992. And so UPenn has as well. And so we were able to do that in his alumni interview. He had adequate time to prepare after our research prep in the morning. He was assisted by Shani, that alumni member who is a Harmony Plus teammate that I mentioned as well, who was able to show him a little bit of the behind the scenes of what an alumni interview looks like for the interviewer. And at the end, you know, we're still waiting on this admissions decision, obviously, but he was told by this alumni interviewer that he was one of the best applicants that had ever been interviewed that he had done. So that was a very good thing on our part. Anyway, so why don't we keep on going? And so I do want to point out a few sort of typical interview questions. Now, when I do full interview trainings for our future planning services, I try to distinguish between what are called general questions and specific questions, right? A general question being something that I could ask to any person. Why are you interested in this school, right? I can ask Calla this question. I can ask Aaron this question. I can ask whoever, right? As opposed to a specific question which says, oh, I see on your application that you did some volunteer time for UNICEF. What inspired you to do that, right? That's a question specific to the applicant. So obviously for this, we're going to look at a few general questions and think of some advice. And so when you talk about these new schools, right? Why do you want to apply for a school? What other schools are you considering? Remember that for many of these questions, what they're looking to hear is an interest in the school and what specifically about the school makes them interesting. You want to avoid descriptors like beautiful campus, great professors, you know, awesome dining halls, these things, right? Not only are they kind of trivial in the grand scheme of things, but also, you know, they're not specific to the school. You want to talk specifically about a kind of program that they offer, a kind of area that they specialize in. If it's especially pertinent to your major, you want to talk about what things are there. Maybe there's a specific faculty member that you are interested in studying under, right? I think even at the undergraduate level, some people get interested in that, although it's sometimes thought of as being more of a grad school thing. But when they ask, what other schools are you considering, right? You should tackle this question honestly, but you want to know a little bit about why they ask it. And usually one of the reasons why they ask is because they want to gauge where does their school lie in terms of the overall breadth of schools you're applying to. Are we more of a safety school? Are we one of your reach schools, right? An admissions officer is going to have very good knowledge in terms of how their university stacks up against other schools. And so they'll be able to tell based on your list where they lie in that overall pool. And that will help them understand. If they are a reach school, that will help them say, okay, well, this person really wants to get in here, right? We're really at the top of the pool that they're applying to. And so they really would, if get extended in offer, and if the financial situation checks out, they would definitely attend here. And so that will help you as well. Career goals. Expectations, these are all questions that are pretty common. So career goals, if you know your major, hopefully you have an idea of what your career goals as well. And what will you contribute to our campus community? I mean, you can rely on application responses for this. You can rely on what you already expect to do at the school. But they want to see here that you're going to do more than just show up, go to class, get the A grades, and then graduate, right? They want to see that you will make a positive impact, both as a matriculating student and later on as an alumni. Anyway, I'll move on to another one, right? Our future plans. So what are your long-term and short-term goals and objectives? When did you establish these goals? What do you see yourself doing 5 years from now? What do you really want to do in life? And what are your long-range career objectives? Once again, you should always incorporate the school in these, right? Most people's plans of how they plan to get where they do, get to what they want to do are just, I get a degree in this field, then I get a job in this field, and then I'm good, right? And so here, once again, you want to flatter the school a little bit and talk about specifically how the school can help you meet your goals, right? But at the same time, this is another area where you can also show off intellectualism, right? Remember, a desire to learn. And so obviously common sense tells you don't give an answer that says, you know, I want to get a high paying job and make a lot of money and that's it, right? You want to show off that you will do big things in the future. Remember that for these top tier schools, especially as you're getting into Ivy League, you have US presidents graduating from these schools. You have top government officials. You have people who have gone on to do really influential things. And so they are eager to see that same level of ambition in you. So dream big and talk big, even if it sounds totally ridiculous, right? You really want to show a high degree of ambition because that's what they're looking for in successful alumni. So I do want to talk a little bit now about some question answering strategies. So I'm going to show you a few questions that students have been given and strategies that we did to in advance to help them work on it. So during my interview trainings, here are some things that we came up with. So I had one student named Cassie, and she got what I think is a common general question, which is, who is someone in contemporary society you admire? Who is a role model? And, you know, I've seen this question be asked in mock trainings to a lot of students, and you'll get the common run of, oh, Steve Jobs, Nelson Mandela, you know, people who have made these big impacts onto our contemporary society, and their influence still lingers today. Cassie, in her case, was an art student who really, really loves Taylor Swift. And instead of flat out rejecting this or saying that it was foolish, I thought that this might be a great chance to show depth to an interest and give a surprising answer to the interviewer. Remember that those interviewers at the top schools, they've heard a million times why Steve Jobs is amazing. They've heard a million times why somebody wants to be like Elon Musk. But Taylor Swift, that might be somebody else. And so I think that on its own, we need to give some credibility to this figure, right? That's not just some assumed goodwill that's already given a figure like Nelson Mandela or Elon Musk or whoever, right? And so her and I worked together to find some research and learn more on some ways that we can positively advocate for her role model. And so it turns out Taylor Swift has advocated for equal pay for artists on streaming services since 2015. During these past protests of this past year with Black Lives Matter and the other social issues, she advocated that some Civil War federal statues be removed. She has a strong work ethic. Apparently, she's put out like 2 or 3 full-length albums during the quarantine, and also that her songwriting, Cassie was able to cite a few songs that had some very deep metaphorical meanings to them that were beyond, I think, the stereotypes that people might have about pop music or specifically Taylor Swift's music. And one song in particular that was about this woman who married into a Standard Oil fortune and then was a middle-class social outcast after the husband died. And she lived in what is now one of Taylor Swift's presumably several mansions. But this was an example of some very deep, layered metaphorical writing. And I think that if you can give an answer like this that surprises the interviewer, but also makes them take a second and think, oh, you know what, maybe my notion about this person was wrong, or maybe I have a better sense of this cultural figure because of what was said here, you know, that's another way that we can give an advantage or give a surprising answer that will be very memorable. Anyway, earlier I brushed on what were called the shortcoming questions, right? What is an area that you think you can improve in? And so with one student we had named Peter, I mean, this can sometimes be a tough thing, right? When you have spent so much time on your application as well as your interview talking about why you're amazing, why you deserve to be admitted to this school, why that last spot deserves to be yours, to suddenly turn around and say, oh, by the way, I'm really bad at this thing, or I stand to improve at this thing, can be a little tough. And so for Peter, who is one of our students, the big thing that he had to lean in on and embrace a little bit more was talking about his struggles with ADHD. Right. And so he was able to talk a little bit about things that strategies he'd already taken. He'd been prescribed medication. He had a schedule for reviewing with teachers, and he also had time management schedules. But he also needed to take another step and really make sure that his studies were reflecting his full potential. And so he was able to make that his shortcomings question and talk more in greater detail about how he plans to tackle it in the school. And so, you know, if you're someone who's fortunate enough that you don't have something as huge as ADHD to talk about in this scenario, still think of something, right? We all have our shortcomings. Nobody is amazing at every single thing they do. But think honestly about what steps have you already taken to approach this topic and how might you do it more in the future? And as I've bolded again here at the bottom is never answer this with something that's actually a positive, right? That's the last thing you want to do to an interview. I think it's actually even a little bit disrespectful to answer a question this way because it shows the interviewer that you are unwilling to get at the core of what they're asking. Anyway, so I'll do one more answer, which is if you don't know an answer, don't lie, but also show the school how the school can help you learn. And so this was with a student named Andre, who is one of the examples of an undeclared major for us. And sometimes with an undeclared major, it can be very difficult because, you know, how can we talk about the way that a school's resources can help us achieve our goal if we're not sure what the goal or what the path to the goal is, right? And so we can already, even in those situations, we can do some research around the school and make it a situation where we can highlight how that school can help us get to those goals, right? And so the way that he talked about this was saying that, you know, in the school, there's a wider breadth of courses, there's more opportunities than he can get involved into than what he could at his small high school, right? There's also, when it comes to gen ed requirements, a broader range of what he can take. He's not just taking the same math class as everybody else. He's not just taking the same social studies course as everybody else. And so he felt naturally that might lend him school situations where he could discover what his calling is or what his passion is. And fortunately, the school also had what was called a BDIC option, which stands for Bachelor's Degree in Individual Concentration, which basically means that you can put together your own curriculum and your own major, your path towards it. It has to be approved by staff members in its respective departments, but it's another path where you can get a bachelor's degree in a topic that is cultivated to your interests. And another advantage of the BDIC, if I might point it out, is that you automatically graduate top of your class or top of your major when you put this one together. But anyway, so these are some cool strategies you can use for answering what might be considered tougher questions. Anyway, sorry, my PPT went out for a second there. So another thing that I ask people to think about is being informed, right? Remember, I mentioned earlier that for top tier schools, you often have top alumni graduating from them, right? And so interviewees may often be asked societal questions or things that related to issues going on currently. And in these situations, I don't think it's enough to say, I haven't heard about that, or I'm not interested in politics, those kinds of things. Remember, if you want to be a strong alumni, you have to show interest in what's going on in the world and things that are happening there in the moment. So I do recommend that for people applying for schools, and especially high-ranking schools, you should have informed and well-stated opinions about coronavirus, the 2020 US election, climate change, as well as social media and its influences on mental health in youth. These are very common questions asked at both the college and private high school level. And so it's areas that I recommend that students keep up on. And so, you know, in this day and age, to speak on social media a little bit, it's very easy to be informed, I find. Whether you're using TikTok, Snapchat, or you're an adult who uses the Apple News outlet, you definitely have all sorts of ways that you can get your news. And so it is a good habit for students to try to stay informed and on top of things that are going on. If you can list some news sources that you like to read, podcasts that you like to listen to, that continues to display both that intellectual side as well as shows that you are invested in things happening in the world. And once you have the resources or the platform, which usually comes with having a bachelor's degree from a top school, you can begin to make your own impact on the world. And a final sort of note I'll give for my section is to watch for language and don't make yourself seem a liability to a school, right? Obviously, this past 2020, among the several things that happened, there was a wide sweep of conversations on social inequity between people of different genders, people of different races, people of different classes. And so you want to avoid politically loaded language or controversial opinions. And actually in our trainings now, Harmony Plus is seeking to implement what we call a cultural competency component to our trainings, where we'll give students the skills to address people of different backgrounds, how to address race, gender, LGBT identities, people of different religions. And so that's another area that we're seeking to get into as well. Anyway, I'm going to toss it over to Calla now to give us a little more advice on something she touched on earlier, which is how to tackle the age of the digital interview.
Okay, well, thanks for all that information, William. Now let's talk about some tips for doing virtual interviews. So first of all, be well dressed. Okay, you don't need to wear like a formal tux, but a lot of people feel like when they're doing a video interview, they can still be really casual. Well, maybe your bottom can be casual because no one's going to see that. If you want to wear pajama pants or some basketball shorts, then go for it. But definitely whatever is going to be in your screen needs to look professional. Okay, so boys, maybe, nice shirt, girls, blouse, something like that. Okay, also try to make consistent eye contact. So be looking into that camera. Okay, don't be like staring at a different part of the screen. It's good to have the right background behind you. Have like a clean room or maybe a blank wall like I do, or an appropriate virtual background. So this is probably my favorite slide of this entire presentation because actually these two wonderful young ladies were in the creative writing class that I taught and William was the coordinator for. Now for creative writing class, I let them be a little creative with their backgrounds just because it's a little more fun in class. However, this would certainly not be appropriate for an interview to have a candy shop background, even though it does look pretty cute. Okay, also check the lighting. Okay, so make sure that your camera is between you and the light source. You don't want too much lighting back there. Okay, like the picture down here. Also, don't have other things that are going on your computer. I know everyone likes to multitask, but interview time is not the time to multitask. So don't be like playing video games or messaging your friends, checking emails, any of that. Because the interviewers will be able to tell if you're not paying attention, and that'd be a really awkward situation. Certainly would not help your case. Okay, so those are some tips for interviews. And then what should you do after the interview? So hopefully everything went well. Definitely show your appreciation by thanking your interviewer. If you don't already have their contact information, I'd recommend asking them for it, and then be sure that you send them a thank you note. These days, a lot of people will send an email, but if you want to be a little old-fashioned, sometimes it's fun to receive a little mail too and a handwritten card, if you'd somehow be able to send them that. But it's optional, email or card. Either way is great. Just show some gratitude. Okay, so that is all about interviews. Now I'll talk a little bit about how we help students prepare for interviews and more at Harmony Plus. But first, I want to let you guys know that we're having a special promotion today. So since today's theme was interviews, you can win a free mock interview. So how can you do that? Well, there are two levels that we have here. So first of all, if you invite at least 10 parents with children, ages 9+ to the group chat that is on the right on this slide, then you can win a free 20-minute mock interview for your child. And if you want to go big and invite 21 or more parents, then you could receive a free mock interview plus some advice for improving. So a little more with that mock interview. Okay, so get your QR reader out and join that group on WeChat. Okay, so let's say that you are able to invite all of these parents. Then how can you get this mock interview? So how to redeem this, you should also add Ms. Nee here. So just scan the QR code. Okay, then you can add her on WeChat And then you can just send some evidence for those parents you added, like send some screenshots or something like that. And then once you hit 10 or 21, then we will schedule the mock interview. Okay, so definitely take advantage of that great opportunity, because kids will have to do interviews at some point in their life, whether it's for private schools, colleges, and definitely for jobs in the future, right? So this is a great opportunity. So, okay, now I will talk a little bit about future planning, okay, or as we like to say, moonshot education. So future planning is kind of like the cornerstone of everything that we do here at Harmony Plus. It's kind of like the logic line. Like, that's why we have the programs in the first place, right? Like, that's why students are doing reading and writing, or FEC, our Future Entrepreneur Challenge, preparing for interviews, any of this. It's so they can go to a good college, then get a good job, have a good future, find meaningful work and live a meaningful life with a high standard of living. So that's why we call it future planning and not just college applications or something like that. Okay, so now let me tell you guys a little bit more on the next slides. So under the umbrella of future planning, we have quite a few different services. So something that we've been super busy with in the past few weeks have been the private middle school and high school applications. Okay, so I've been doing almost all of the essay editing for that, and William has been doing almost all of the interview training. Okay, so we've been super involved in that. That's why we're here giving the interview presentation today. Then for students who are a little bit older, who are in high school or grades 8 through 11, we help with academic and extracurricular enhancement. It's really making sure that students are preparing well for their college applications. Then we offer college application essay and essay services for grade 12 students. We do transfer applications, graduate school applications. So I've been quite busy with those as well lately. We also have essay writing workshops, like I taught the UC Essay Bootcamp back in October to help students prepare for that. Then we also have one-on-one essay editing and interview training. Okay, so I'll go into that a little more in depth later. Then we also have our EATIC, Extracurricular Activity Training and Internship Club. That's where we help students build their extracurricular profile with many different activities and internships and things like that. And then last but certainly not least, we have the Future Leader Academy. So that helps students develop their leadership skills and work with a top business school professor. And actually, we're working on publishing an article for a journal right now. So a lot of cool things with that. William and I are the coordinators for FLA and EATIC as well. So kind of involved in many things here. Okay, so now let me go a little bit more in depth into the 9th to 11th grade services. Okay, so essentially what we aim to do for the younger students in future planning. We really want to help students build a personalized, competitive application profile. In order to do that, you really need to start this in 8th or 9th grade. Okay, you need to have enough time to do that. So now let's take a look at the next slide and see exactly what we do in that. Okay, so here are some more details. Normally we have 10 meetings per year, and we have different levels that kind of like relates to how much time we spend with students during meetings and outside. We help students assess which majors and careers are the best for them, evaluate the students' academics, provide support as needed, advise students on which classes they should take. Okay, then we help students prepare for their tests. Well, we don't do the actual, or I personally, as a coach and consultant, don't do the actual tutoring, but I do help tell students when they should take certain tests, tell them about the registration process, help them create a plan for when they should take those tests. And also help students create study plans, because it is hard to be motivated to study for things like the SAT. So I help with that stuff. We also have SAT tutoring services for students who need help with certain subjects. Then we also help out with activity research and planning. So depending on the student's interests and what they want to do in the future, we make recommendations. Recently, I've been creating summer proposals for all of my students. Okay, so what I do for that is I look into a bunch of different summer programs that students could do based on their interests and the path that they might want to take in their major and career. And then I create a proposal for them, and then they can choose the ones that they want to do. And then we work on their summer program applications. Then we help students prepare their resume. We create college lists and we help students research different colleges to find a good fit, help them plan college tours, etc. So that's most of what we do in 9th and 11th grade. Okay, now what exactly do we do for students who are applying? Whether it's 12th graders applying for undergrad or college students doing transfer or college seniors wanting to apply for grad school. Well, we want to package that applicant and present them in the best light possible to whichever programs that they're applying for. So now let's take a look at the specific details. Okay, so we offer different application packages. It's just kind of like based on how many schools you want to apply to. You know, all of our proposals and contracts are very individualized. So we always have conversations with prospective clients and then figure out which path would be best, like how many schools they should apply to, etc. Meetings are as necessary. We help come up with a strategy for students' application profile, you know, how we should really package them, help students choose the right major, develop a college list, help students with the whole essay process, like essay brainstorming, how to write their essays, structuring that essay. I'm coming up with a strategy for the early applications, helping students with interviews, as we discussed today. Also, with college tours, if students get deferred or are waitlisted, we help with a strategy with that. Maybe like another email needs to be sent to the admissions office, for instance. Then once students get all those acceptances, which school to choose. So then we help them decide which college to ultimately attend. And then we also give them some information about the free college services, like what exactly they should expect, and getting registered and all of that stuff. And then other personalized services as well. Okay, so that's a bit about what we do for our students doing applications. So those packages that I just talked about are the more comprehensive packages. However, sometimes people just want some essay support or just want like essay and interview training, and then they'll take care of the application themselves. So, you know, people have different needs, and we have all sorts of packages depending on what is best for you. Okay, so here's what we do when people just want to do one-on-one essay editing, interview training, and video supplement support. Okay, so we do essay brainstorming and create outlines, and normally I'm the one who does that, and I usually do that with students in meetings. Okay, just to really like get those ideas flowing. It's always good to talk to someone, have a conversation. And the ideas can really evolve over the course of discussing the essays for an hour. Then after the meetings, we edit multiple drafts. So sometimes we'll have meetings to discuss the drafts. Sometimes we'll just do editing on Google Docs outside of drafts. Google Docs is super convenient, just like going into suggestion mode and in the comments. Okay, we also do proctored writing training. So for a lot of private schools, the students need to do a proctored writing. So we help with that as well and give feedback and kind of simulate that environment. Then we also do interview training sessions. Okay, and William specializes in that, so he's been working with a lot of our private school students. In addition to training students, he also helps students prepare and helps them do some research. As William mentioned before, with that alumni interview case study, you know, it's not just about training of how you're going to talk, but you should also do some research into the school, as well as the person who's interviewing you. So that's something that William and our other consultants help with too. Then we also set up a mock interview. So our colleague Nebi is usually the one to help with that, just so we have a totally new face for the students, because you know, after working with William and I for so long, like the students get too comfortable with us, so we need to bring a fresh face in. And then you know, some schools, you know, private schools as well, will have these video supplements. So William will often help out with students who need to write a script for that, and then record that and edit the video if it's not a live one. So that's a bit about what we do for the essay editing and interview training support. Now I'll show you guys a sample schedule for this. So we create schedules that are individually tailored based on like how many schools people are applying to, which grades they're in, how many essays they need, etc. So this is just a sample that I created recently. So, you know, we decide, okay, we're going to do like 2 applications, 10 hours. So then I created a very detailed plan of exactly when we're going to have meetings, when I would be editing essays, and when the applications are due, things like that. So people who sign up for this get a very individualized plan, just like this. And we try to stick to it as much as possible to make sure that you can get all of your applications in on time. Okay. And then, yeah, so that's a bit about our services and interviews in general. So hopefully you guys all learned something and are ready for interviews. Once again, here's our special promotion. Okay, so feel free to scan both of those QR codes and join the group, and also add Ms. Nee if you want to take advantage of this. Okay.
Yeah. And I have a special message from our CEO, Bill Zhao, who wants me to mention as well that we have a strong team. We have former admissions officers, colleagues, such as Shani alumni who are from these top schools who can kind of allow students to take a peek behind the curtain in terms of how that admissions process works, especially with things like alumni interviews and how the decision is made. And so there's a lot where we can help students improve in these areas. And so once again, I think our next slide on this is the Q&A slide, but I'll leave it stayed on this slide in case people want to take out their phone and add these QR codes. But we are going to open up the floor for questions now. I see we have one already. Are you able to see what it is, Calla? I'm afraid I can't open it on my side.
Oh, yes, I am. Okay, so someone asked, can you please share some schools that do proctored writing for admissions? And usually at what stage is that done? Okay, yeah, that's a great question. So that's more for like the private school applications, especially the private high schools in the Bay Area. I should say private middle school and private high schools. So quite a few of these schools have students like do like one proctored writing, then it might get shared. Okay, so that's usually done, at some point in the application process, the students are able to sign up for that, and then they can do that. So I'm usually not the one actually signing the students up. I'm mostly just training them for that. But yeah, the students will go on Zoom, and usually they have to write by hand, actually. So a little bit tough when I was helping train students because they had to write things by hand, and then they had to like type it so then I could give them feedback and edit it. But yeah, so that's kind of how that works. So a lot of the private schools for middle school and high school in the Bay Area will do the proctored writing.
Great answer. And so I think we can wait another minute if other participants have questions now.
Okay, I don't see any more questions, so perhaps that we can wrap up.
All right, if that's the case, then I do want to say thank you to everybody who participated in tonight's webinar. It really means a lot to us that you would take time from what for some people might still be a vacation period to come and witness this very important webinar, and that you would come and see the content that Calla and I have prepared and what we've been working on for the past several months. So thank you all again. I hope you all had a great new year, and we'll see you next week.
Okay, thank you guys so much.
All right. Bye, everybody.
Bye.